interpretation in Spanish. So please bear with us while we do this. Buenas tardes a todas y todos. Si necesitan interpretación en español, se estará ofreciendo para esta sesión. Si pueden ver en su plataforma de Zoom, hay un globo que dice interpretación. Entonces, si necesitan interpretación, tenemos una persona que está traduciendo al español. Entonces, solamente tendrán que seleccionar el globito o el mundo y poder ponerlo ahí. So some instructions, this is being translated. And so if at any point where we start asking questions, if we can ask everyone to speak slowly and to also spell out any acronyms. It makes it easier for our interpreter. So welcome. All right, well, we'll go ahead and get started in the interest of time and just to make sure we have enough time to get the most out of this session. Thank you all for joining us for the second session for What's Your Next for Business series. Today, we're joined by community businesses and experts in employee ownership. We're really excited to share about the journey and how you can explore these models to use the power of the collective to help your business during these difficult times. So before we begin, I want to let you know that this session is being recorded. And so if you don't feel comfortable, please feel free to turn off your camera, although we would love to see your face if you're comfortable with that. We do want to save this and share it with others who are unable to be here today. So I also want to take a moment to thank our co-sponsoring organizations, Good Business Colorado, Malhai Connects, Rocky Mountain Employee Ownership Center, Mi Casa Resource Center, and Center for Community Wealth Building. My name is Jessica Orguin. I am the Executive Director of Center for Community Wealth Building. We won't talk very much about community wealth building, but I do want to share that we work to build an economy that catalyzes prosperous and resilient communities free from racism and injustice. We work on 3 strategic priorities, which include promoting and advancing the field of worker cooperatives. We believe in strengthening local people of color-owned small businesses and entrepreneurship, and engaging anchor institutions. So if you think about hospitals and universities and how they use their economic engine to support our local economies through their hiring practices, procurement, and investment. So we're really excited to be here today. We are joined by Amy and Ashley, and we will also hear from Lakshmi, Jeremy, and Cyan today. And I'll do more presentations later, or introductions. But right now, I want to give you an overview of the session. So for the first about 30 minutes, we're going to hear from Amy Bears and Ashley Ortiz from Rocky Mountain Employee Ownership Center. They will spend a little bit of time giving us an overview of employee ownership and the spectrum of employee ownership. And then after that, we're going to hear from Lakshmi Nair from Satya Yoga Cooperative, Jeremy Ferber from Flying Miata, and Cyan Stonesmith from Trident Booksellers and Cafe to hear more about their experience and their journey through employee member ownership. So without further ado, I would like to introduce you all to Amy Bears and Ashley Ortiz with Rocky Mountain Employee Ownership Center.
Thank you, Jessica, and good evening, everyone. Great to have you with us for this webinar. As Jessica mentioned, I am the Executive Director of the Rocky Mountain Employee Ownership Center. We're a nonprofit organization that's been around since about 2012, headquartered in Denver, but working statewide throughout Colorado. We work to create a more inclusive economy through employee ownership. And we do that in a number of different ways. The first is by working with Colorado businesses to offer direct technical assistance for conversion of existing businesses to employee ownership. We also provide education and do outreach on employee ownership models, benefits, and best practices. And we work to create connections between employee-owned companies to strengthen the sector of employee ownership. So why are we talking about employee ownership right now during this current crisis? I'm sure that it's no big new news to any of you who are here with us this evening that we are in a current economic crisis. And we know that this crisis has really hit small businesses particularly hard. And within that, even more so, Black-owned businesses and other businesses owned by entrepreneurs of color. a recent poll nationally found that about 45% of business owners right now feel that they're going to have to shut their doors permanently within the next 6 months if something doesn't change. And so what we know about employee ownership is that it actually makes businesses more resilient. There has been research done on the model because it has been in existence for many decades now that show that during times of recession, employee-owned businesses are more resilient, they're less likely to close, they're less likely to have significant layoffs of workers. And throughout good times and bad, employee-owned companies are more profitable, they have greater growth than traditional companies. And so employee ownership really is a solution that's been proven to work to address loss of jobs and to, because of profit sharing within different models, to produce more income equality. It also helps, as I said, to keep businesses open that otherwise might close, and we would lose those businesses and the services they provide. And this is because workers in employee-owned companies make decisions collectively, and they influence how things are done to keep that business going and to keep it moving forward. So when we talk about employee ownership, what are we really talking about? There are 3 basic elements. The first is that employees own a financial share in the company. The second is that employees have a right to participate in the governance of the company. And the third is that ownership is broadly shared. And so when we talk about broadly shared, we mean that it's not held just among a small number of owners or managers, but it's opened to everyone or a significant number of workers within a company. So there are 2 main types of employee ownership. The first that you may have heard of because it's the largest in the United States are called ESOPs. And that stands for Employee Stock Ownership Plan. An ESOP is essentially a retirement plan where a trust owns stock in the company on behalf of employees, and employees gain shares throughout time and leave the company with significant retirement savings. We're not going to be talking much about ESOPs this evening because they are typically more appropriate for larger companies. There's a range of where it's advisable, but you have to have at least 10 employees. Often we look at companies that may have 50 or more, and about $5 to $10 million in revenue. So for many small businesses, worker cooperatives are a more appropriate option. And worker-owned co-ops can be formed with as few as 3 workers and can be very large. The largest worker co-op, Cooperative Home Care Associates in the Bronx, and you can see some of the worker owners there in the background. They're the largest worker co-op in the United States, and they have over 2,000 employees. And then there are some other kinds of profit sharing or stock sharing models that can also be used for employee ownership. So I'm actually going to turn it over to Ashley Ortiz now, and she's going to get a little bit more deeply into what it is to be a worker cooperative and how companies can think about going through that kind of a transition.
Thanks, Amy. Thanks everybody for being here. So yeah, I'm going to share some more details about worker-owned cooperatives now and talk about how you can start one even during challenging times like these. So what exactly is a worker co-op? In a lot of ways, it's just like any other business, but the difference is that co-op owners, often also called members, are the people that work in the business. And I like this graphic because it shows the 3 main parts of a co-op. The owners have ownership and control, and they benefit financially because of that ownership. The business is collectively owned and democratically governed by the employees. This means that the workers share in the profits of that business, and that each worker has an equal vote to decide how the business is run. So worker-owned co-ops can be any size, and they can be in any type of industry as well. Right now, there's approximately 450 worker-owned co-ops in the United States. A few examples are Namaste Solar, which is a solar company in Boulder, Colorado. As Amy mentioned, there's Cooperative Home Healthcare Associates, which is the largest in the country with over 2,000 worker owners. Another slightly larger example is Alvarado Bread Company based in California. They have around 200 worker owners. They sell bread throughout the country in companies as big as Walmart and internationally. And then there's also lots and lots of smaller cooperatives that are grocery stores, farms, coffee shops, design companies, bakeries, engineering companies, taxi companies, and many more, again, in lots of different industries. And as I mentioned before, the employees that work there are the owners and the shareholders of that business. And membership is open to all based on set criteria that's set forth specifically by the workers and the owners of that business. So in order to become an owner, employees buy into the co-op with an equal amount that's set by the founders and the board of directors. And then annual profits are distributed equitably, usually using a formula based on the number of hours people work, so that it's equitable across the board based on the amount of time somebody's within that cooperative. And on a day-to-day basis, co-ops really function like any other business. On the surface, you may not know that a business is cooperatively owned, but I do feel like a lot of times you can notice, because as you can imagine, having every person that works there be an owner, it just feels different. You can get that sense that people have more invested in the business, in the day-to-day work that they do in that business. So tonight we're going to do a really brief overview about 3 different ways that you can either start or become a worker-owned co-op if you already have a company at this point. The first way is to start up a new business that can be a worker-owned co-op from the very beginning. Another way is to convert an existing business that's already operating. And third, you can find like-minded people and combine several smaller businesses into a new cooperative. So a successful pathway to employee ownership usually includes these steps. And the length of time that any of these paths take can vary a lot based on the situation, the type of business, but it can be anywhere from 6 months to even a year, or even longer if it's a more complicated situation. But during that time, no matter what path you're on towards an employee ownership situation, you'll be moving through most likely some form of these types of steps. You'll be going through an exploration phase, assessment, structuring, and actually executing the new entity. And then that's usually followed by some sort of support for getting things launched, because even though the businesses function very similarly to other businesses, the operations and the governance side of things does change. As you can imagine, getting the ownership into the hands of more people takes some support and all of these steps to happen in a way that makes the business successful and stay efficient in terms of operations, and staying focused on the business itself while the operations and the governance of how the business runs takes on a new form. So now I'm going to walk through how these phases might look like for the 3 different types of paths to employee ownership that we laid out. And of course, there's some overlap, but we thought it'd be helpful tonight to be able to envision each path separately, in hopes that one of those paths might offer a solution for any of the challenges that you're facing today. So for a startup, you'd want to at first identify a founding group of preferably at least 3 people to begin talking about business feasibility and funding possibilities, things like that, before you actually got started with the structure. And at that point, you'd want to be deciding about what type of business makes sense for your industry, And then you can start defining things like bylaws and actually starting up that new entity. And then throughout the process, you can always reach out for help. As I mentioned, one of the phases is support, and there's lots of entities to help with that. The Center for Community Wealth Building has resources for startup support. And also at the end of these slides, we do have a slide with lots of names of support, not only locally and nationally, that we'll share with you for any of these paths that we're talking about. And then the second type that I mentioned is conversions. So with a conversion, it's another path to ownership where a current business would be changing into a cooperative. And this is a situation where the existing owner of the business would sell to the employees of that business. The selling owners can either stay a part of the business, or that might be a way for them to exit and actually leave. And this can be an option for business owners who are nearing retirement, or just during any time when they might otherwise want to close that business, which would otherwise leave the community with lost jobs and lost services. But a conversion to a worker-owned co-op is one potential way to save the business and keep it going, and even spread the wealth more widely throughout the community. And I want to point out that this doesn't mean that the employees have to come up with the money to buy the business. I think sometimes it's easy to think that this might not be an option because of that hurdle, but there are options for financing to make that happen. And the most common way to do this is that the workers would form a new cooperative, and that cooperative would take out a loan to pay for the business so that they can pay for it and give that money to the existing owner. And then the co-op then pays off that loan over time. So that's a way for that to happen for the current employees to actually purchase the business. So if this seems like an option that you'd want to pursue, you can start by thinking about how employee ownership would work for you given your current culture of the business value, what your plans might be as a current owner for the future, whether you'd want to stay involved or move along and fully pass the business off to the employees. And then you'd want to put together a transition team, discuss funding options, just like with any other option, and seek support for lawyers, in this case, most likely to structure the actual sale of the business to the employees and help with the foundation of that new cooperative. And in this case, we at the Rocky Mountain Employee Ownership Center can help with that. And again, we'll show you this list. There's lots of other entities that can help with a business conversion. And then the third option that we wanted to share with you tonight is the potential for multiple existing small or micro businesses to come together to form one new co-op. So for example, say a business owner is making hummus and another one is making pita breads, and another person, say, has a storefront already where they're selling products out of a storefront or a small store. Those three businesses could combine efforts to sell everything together and benefit from things like shared marketing, shared contacts, and just the energy that collective working can bring. It's nice to have other people to work with, as I'm sure many of you know. So hopefully a merger between two or more separate businesses that might be struggling to do it all, you know what that feels like if you're an owner of a business, and trying to make a profit, that could lead to a new cooperative with greater revenues and shared services to take off the burden of operating a business by yourself or with just a few people. And so this type of direction could happen relatively quickly, in a matter of a few months, possibly even in the right situation. And to start exploring this path, you'd want to think first about other compatible businesses or services or products that you know about, and assess how you might work together. And then you'd want to also determine funding opportunities to help support the transition and create plans for operations. And in this case, also, then you would sort of merge into the startup path for starting a new entity, finding ways to market new products, etc. And again, both the Center for Community Wealth Building, the Rocky Mountain Employee Ownership Center, and many others can assist down this path. So these are some of the entities I've already mentioned this evening. The first three are local, and then I just wanted to note that the last four are nationally based entities that can help with all sorts of employee ownership directions, especially worker-owned cooperative information. So that's all we have for you right now. I'm going to pass it along, and we'll have time for questions, I think, at the end. Thanks, everybody.
Great, thank you. If anybody has any questions, please feel free to use the chat feature, and we will have time at the end to answer any of your questions. So at this point, we're going to transition to hearing about from employee owners. Thank you, Ashley and Amy, for the great overview. Now, I would love to introduce you all now to our employee owners. We have Lakshmi Nair from Satya Yoga Cooperative. We are joined by Cian Stonesmith from Trident Booksellers and Cafe, and Jeremy Ferber from Flying Miatas. And it looks like we have all three of them here, so perfect. So we're gonna do a quick introduction. Maybe if you all can do 3 minutes to talk about your employee/member ownership journey. So if you can share with the group what that was like for 3 minutes. And we'll start with Lakshmi, and then we'll go with Cyan, and then we'll finish up with Jeremy for this quick introduction, and then we have a set of few questions. So Lakshmi, would you like to get us started with your journey?
Sure. Hello, everyone. My name is Lakshmi Nair, and as Jessica mentioned, I am a member owner of Satya Yoga Cooperative in Denver, and we just formed this member-owned cooperative in 2018, towards the end of 2018. So we've been around, yeah, I guess it's getting close to 2 years now. So, and how this formed, so this is a BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, and people of color owned small business, member-owned cooperative, and it grew out of a yoga teacher training for people of color that I've been running since 2014. So after about 4 years of doing this yoga teacher training for people of color, and that was just my own personal business, you know, doing business as myself. But one of the things that I always felt towards the end of the teacher training, when I was sort of talking about the business of yoga and like how to get started as a yoga teacher, I always felt that I was sort of sending people out into an industry that, you know, is really difficult, right? It's really difficult to make it as a yoga teacher, and especially as people of color, which is one of the reasons why I had, you know, started this yoga teacher training for people of color in the first place. And it was in a way trying to create a space for myself as well. So, so after about 4 years, and I had gotten a lot of advice from people, you know, a lot of people suggesting that I should try to go the nonprofit route because, you know, then I can get more grants and such. But that just didn't feel right to me. So I had heard about worker-owned cooperatives, actually from some of my students, and got in touch with Jonathan Stahls, who had started a cooperative called Walk to Connect. So I had met with him, kind of learned about it, then got connected with Jessica from Community Wealth Building, learned more about the co-op model, and then presented it to my students and asked, you know, who would like to be involved in this? You know, are you interested? And yeah, and we had a lot of interest. And then currently we have 11 member owners in the business.
Thank you, Lakshmi. And yeah, I would say that in terms of, from a community perspective, Satya Yoga Cooperative has brought so much to our communities. Their vision is to be a healing force for, by, and for people of color, using yoga as a tool for both personal liberation and social transformation. And so it's been really powerful to see how this model could be not only beneficial for the instructors, but also for our communities as well. So thank you, Lakshmi. We have a lot more questions, but that was a great introduction. Great. We will now hear from Sian Stonesmith, new employee owner at Trident Booksellers and Cafe. For those of you who have been in Boulder, you might have walked by Trident Booksellers and Cafe. The longstanding bookstore has been is starting through the ownership process. A group of employees were offered a share of the business in the last 6 months. And we will hear from Sian, who is one of the soon to be or is a new business owner.
Hi everyone, my name is Diane. I was the man, or I guess I still am the manager of the bookstore at Trident Cafes and Booksellers. So we are a cafe and bookstore in one business. And I don't know if anyone's been to Boulder, but we've been open for 40 years. So we're pretty iconic, I guess you would say, in the Boulder literary community. So throughout that 40 years as a small business, you know, we've gone through a lot from like Starbucks, Barnes and Noble, you know, Borders, all of those like big chains opening. And really the thing that has kept our community and our business thriving over the past 40 years is the stake that employees have in it. We're very community oriented, have always been very community based. However, we have been owned by the owners for most of those 40 years until the past, I think it was 3 months ago in July, we became employee owned. And that really came out of COVID, honestly, and realizing that employees are really the lifeblood of this community, and we're the ones who know what's best for the business, know how to make it work even in the hardest of circumstances. And so in July, we became employee owned and we have 9 employees now. The ownership opportunity was open to anyone who had been there for longer than a year. So we have 9 employees now that are owners in the business. And yeah, I think that's all I have to say as an introduction.
Great, thank you. And yeah, if anybody has been to Boulder and you haven't been there, definitely encourage you to visit because it is definitely a landmark in our communities. Great, so we'll now hear from Jeremy Ferber. Jeremy is a new employee owner with Flying Miata. Flying Miata is located in Palisade, Colorado. It is a 37-year-old business that is in the process of becoming employee owned. It is a specialty auto parts distributor. It has 16 employees, 9 of whom are becoming employee owners. Jeremy is part of that group purchasing the business from the original owners. So Jeremy, tell us a little bit about your employee ownership journey.
Hi, Jessica. Thank you for the introduction. Once again, I'm Jeremy Ferber. And today is actually my 16th anniversary with Flying Miata. So I've been there since 2004. And, you know, we've always had a really high level of tenure in the company with folks that work there. To give you some background, we started out as a shop years and decades ago, turning wrenches on cars. And then we started getting into mail order back in the early 90s. And then from there, it got into e-commerce and doing all these things at the same time. And then over the last couple of years, we've transitioned into just doing e-commerce as we've kind of, you know, figured out our role in the community and who our customers are and all these things. And so we're in a fairly remote location on the Western Slope, but we can be wherever we want because we're e-commerce. And the owners have been the owners this entire time, and they're looking to retire. And so this doesn't have anything to do with COVID. You know, the timing is actually pretty good for us, but they've wanted to retire for a while. And, you know, they looked at different opportunities as far as investment capitalists versus, competitors that might be interested in buying the business, but they really wanted to keep the employees and keep the jobs and, just kind of keep the culture of the company, which if it was to sell to a venture capitalist would obviously just, take it for the money. And if it was to sell to a competitor, they would, take the best of the stuff and then get rid of the rest and probably close and move to wherever their location was. So they decided with all those things in mind that they were able to fulfill what they needed as retiring business owners and then still leave the rest of it with a viable business. So, it's actually really worked out great. And there's a number of us that have been there for a long time, 15, 20 plus years. And then we have some other younger employees too, and we're all going to share equally in this, which is really amazing. So, and the journey's been really good. We originally got put in contact with RMEOC through a local business incubator, and they came over. I actually saw it and said, "Hey, boss, why don't you go check this out?" And this was a couple years ago. And then a whole bunch of rabbit trails were gone down since then. And this is kind of where we ended up. And it's been a good journey. RMEOC has been really fantastic as far as facilitating the different resources that we need as far as, attorneys and advice and all in direction and putting together, programs to help teach the people that are going to be involved, because obviously some of us have been involved in the management of this company for years. And then there's other folks who are, mid-level managers or fairly new to the business that are also going to be eligible to be owners that haven't been involved in years. And so, we need to have these resources to bring everyone up to, that level so that we can all be, equal and effective in the ownership process. So yeah, it's been going really well. Actually, our closing date on the sale is November 1st. So we're coming down to the wire right now. And yeah, it's going great. And we're all really looking forward to, what's going to come in the future.
Wow, that's great. Good luck. It's so close, and yet I'm sure there's still a lot to do between now and November 1st. So perhaps one of the first questions I want to hear from you all is, how did you learn about employee ownership or member ownership? And was this something that you brought to the company, or did somebody else bring it? And what did that process look like for the rest of the employee or member owners?
I guess I can start off. For years with our business, we have a very, very great customer base. And, we're kind of in the automotive aftermarket, we're kind of a big fish in a small pond. So, we've got a fairly small customer base in terms of the big picture, but they're all people that really love us and, keep coming back. And for years, people that we're on a first name basis with, know personally, said, they've known the boss wanted to retire for a long time now. Said, why don't you guys buy the business? And, speaking to myself and my colleagues who are all kind of the senior level people in the business. And, that was just always kind of a theme. And so as we were going through these, the owner said, well, are you guys interested in buying the business? And we said, well, of course we're interested, but, and we're all employees and, we don't exactly have a tremendous amount of revenue that we can just buy you out. So we're not sure how it would work, but of course we're interested. And so there was a process of kind of discussing the ideas for years in order to distill it down into something that's workable. But once we got into this position with RMEOC, it's been a really great process.
Thank you.
I'll go next. So the way that Trident really found out about or started to step along the process of becoming employee owned was that we've always been really community based. It's always felt like the employees have really had a say and a real drive to make the business go well. However, we were running into some bumps between owners and employees. We had different ideas and different views as with any business where the employees hold a strong stake in the business. And we just decided to eliminate that by letting the employees become owners. And now we're all able to work really well together and have a more level or equitable dialogue between the people that run the business.
Thank you.
Yeah. And I can just say that I mentioned before, you know, that I was just kind of exploring different options. And so I was the one who sort of brought the idea, you know, after learning about co-ops to my students. But I felt it felt very natural because, you know, through the yoga teacher training that we do, it's a 9-month-long program. We start to really build a sense of community. And so there was already like almost a collective or a community that had grown over the 4 years. And it was sort of an informal collective. And so it was really more of a matter of, you know, kind of giving it a little bit more shape and giving people more ownership in it.
Thank you. So now my next question is about benefits. And so Lakshmi, what benefits has member ownership brought to the business? And for Jeremy and Sian, what benefits do you hope employee ownership will bring?
Yeah, so definitely, you know, like just being able to pool our resources, you know, because really what we're you know, a group of yoga teachers. So coming, you know, if you're trying to start out as an individual yoga teacher in, you know, in that world, you really have to invest like all of your own resources, right? In terms of marketing and, you know, any of those kind of things, like whether it's logo, website, all of these kind of things, you know, that are required for marketing your business. So even though like we didn't really get any capital other than the pooling of our resources, the co-op dues, you know, like we have our each member contribute a very small nominal amount of co-op dues per year, but being able to pool that amount enabled us to, you know, hire a graphic designer to get a really professional brand kit and logo done. Our website now is like collectively owned, whereas before that was me, you know, paying for those things. We are also able to social media marketing for everyone, right, in the co-op. So it frees up a lot of time for people. And then because we're building a brand, we're building a name. And we actually, you know, have been so fortunate that we've been getting a lot of really good press coverage. Like we, in fact, were even featured in the, I mean, not featured, we had a little mention, I should say, in the New York Times because one of our co-op member owners was featured in the New York Times. And so, so we have a Patreon and all of this, you know, good press is able to like bring us a lot of business and contributions, you know, that are benefiting all of us.
Yeah, that is definitely the power of the collective.
Mm-hmm.
Deanne, Jeremy?
So I think, well, something that's been really beneficial to us as a small business is, I mean, when we're talking to small businesses, like profits matter, you know, as much as community and employee businesses. Just the idea of them matter. The profits are also really important, especially in this difficult time. And we've had, since we became employee owned, we've had the past 2 months have been the most profitable in all of Trident's history in the past 40 years. So that is a really big deal to us. And I'd say that's a huge benefit as, you know, to become employee owned. In terms of future benefits that I hope to achieve, I think that for people that work in the service industry, it's really hard, and the retail industry, it's really hard to get a leg up in, you know, this economy to be able to buy your own house or to invest in other things that you want to do. And I mean, owning a small business is a great stepping stone to do that, on top of the fact that we're going to be able to have benefits now, like healthcare, dental, vision benefits. All of that stuff is really important just for the employees.
Oh, that's wonderful. Congratulations. And I would love at some point the analysis of why you all think it was more profitable despite the current reality, right? Jeremy, how about you? What do you think the benefits will be?
Well, one thing I believe is kind of having a bigger brain trust at the table. You know, everyone that works at our organization is, you know, they're all capable people and they all have different perspectives. They've had different backgrounds. You know, we do have, for example, we have a new fella working there who comes from a completely different background than the rest of us. And so, you know, he's able to bring things to the table and perspectives that the rest of us don't have, especially those of us that have been there 15 and 20 years, because, you know, you kind of see things through your experiences. So I think having that expansion of perspective is very valuable. And also, likewise, the expansion of responsibility. So, you know, we, instead of having 3 of us who are responsible for making the decisions that keep the business afloat, we have more people involved to try to help distill the best ideas and bring the best things forward to help that responsibility level of keeping the business afloat. And I think that's pretty important.
Thank you. Now we have a question from the audience. What concerns did you have? What concerns did you have to address before you settled on employee ownership or member ownership for Satya?
Sorry, Jessica, can you just repeat that?
Yeah, so what concerns did you have to address before you settled on employee ownership? What were some of the considerations?
Yeah, I think, you know, for me, like maybe the biggest concern was just feeling a little bit like I was going in to some, you know, new world that I had no idea about, you know, and then I guess there, you know, because of the way our situation is, it was really like transitioning from my personal business to a cooperatively owned business. So, you know, my concern, you know, one of my concerns was just how to transition that so that people aren't looking to me, because it was growing out of a teacher training where I was sort of the lead, you know, the teacher and the leader, you know, that people weren't always looking to me to be the sort of the head of things, where we, you know, where we could actually be more of a community and make decisions collectively. So yeah, that was probably one of my you know, one of my big concerns. And then also just, you know, I just didn't know you know, like I really had no idea like how we would be able to like generate work. But that's the beauty of having a collective, is that you have all these minds together working on these, you know, these things. Like if you, whatever you can't imagine, someone else can, you know.
Great, thank you. Cyan, Jeremy, what were some of the considerations, and perhaps from the other employees and perhaps from the owners that you were buying it from?
I think our main concern was logistics. You know, we weren't sure how to value the shares, how to open it up to the employees. Was everyone going to be allowed to do this? Was just certain people that had been at the business for longer? And then also we had full shares, like they were all spoken for. And so who was going to give up their shares to let employees own that part of the business? And it was just a conversation, you know, it was like many in-depth conversations that we had to so that everyone felt comfortable and everyone was on the same page.
Who was part of that decision-making process? Was it all employees?
So it was our general manager and the current owners.
Okay, thank you. Jeremy?
I would say a couple additional considerations are doing some honesty checks with the owners to see, are they really ready to give it up? And with the employees, are there enough of them that are really interested in doing this? Because if you have people at both sides of the table that are genuinely ready to do this, especially with facilitation from someone like RMEOC, you can sort out the details.
Great, thank you. We have another question from the audience, and Amy, this one might be for you. How do you know if your business idea is right for this type of venture, or even when it's the right timing?
Sure, I can tackle that one, and I would encourage our panelists to jump in as well, and Ashley, who's our MEOC's technical assistant specialist too. I think, with conversions that we work with, we really are, as I think Jeremy and some of the other panelists have alluded to, we're looking for a business that is stable. It has been around for a while. It's profitable. So it's not losing money. It's either steady or it's growing. Now, of course, right now, we know that that's not the case for a lot of businesses that would be profitable otherwise. So that's a little bit different. And then we look for, what do the owners want? Do they want to stay on? Are they looking to exit? And what do the employees want? Are there employees who have been there for some period of time? And sometimes it doesn't have to be a long time, but are they committed to the business? Is there already a culture of participation and engagement? Sometimes businesses will start to go down the road of maybe working on a co-op conversion. And it can be possible when there's a big learning curve for how to work together collectively. But if businesses are already doing that, it is much, much easier from the outset.
Great, thank you. How about our panelists? Is there anything else you would like to add?
I think for me, as far as timing was concerned, it was just when I felt that I had the energy, from our community. I knew that I had like several people who wanted to work on this together. And so, and I have to say that like it was kind of one of those things, and maybe because I'm a yoga teacher, I'm putting a little mystical spin on this, but it just felt like that once, we decided, everything started like just the ball was rolling, and everything started falling into place. I met Jessica, and like, we had, all these folks who were interested, and just all the support came to us as needed. So that felt like it was the right time. Yeah.
Thank you.
I can add too, from a startup perspective. Also, as I kind of mentioned earlier, having 3 or more people is a good check-in. So if you're starting with a brand new idea, if it's something where it's just yourself or maybe one other person, that's more like a sole proprietorship or a partnership. But for 3 or more people, if you already have that kind of community and agreement among the vision and the idea that you'd like to work with those people, that's often a good testament. And a good thing to remember is that you can always start the business a different way. And as we mentioned, convert it later once you have found that community. So either way, you can do that, but starting out as a co-op, you typically want to have several people involved. Cyan, I think you were going to add something as well.
Oh, I was just going to say that I think Amy hit it right on the head when she said you have to already have a culture of collaboration. I think that that's really important when starting off.
Yeah, thank you. And I'll take a little bit of facilitator's privilege here. For community wealth building, we focus on feasibility of the business because it is still a business. First and foremost, it has to be profitable. And so the more that we can ensure that profitability, that there is a demand for the services offered. If it is a startup, that's typically what we start with. And then of course, the commitment from others as well. So, great. There was a question from the audience for Cyan. Trident mentioned COVID led to the transition. How has COVID affected others as employee-owned or cooperatives? So perhaps if Cyan, if you could talk a little bit about the impact of COVID, and then for Jeremy and Lakshmi, if you could talk about how you've had to pivot your business, or if you've had to.
Absolutely. So we run a physical space. You know, we're retail and a cafe. So like we shut down, you know, when Jared Polis said in the stay-at-home order, we had no one coming into our store. And so what we did was we thought, and we figured out a way to make profits during that time. And what we did was mystery book packs. So we set up something on our website where people would place an order and they would give us an example of, hey, I like mystery books. So we would give them 5 mystery books and a bag of coffee, and we would mail it or deliver it to them on bike if they were local. And we completely emptied out the entire stock of our store. It was totally empty. The shelves were empty, which I mean is incredible. And we were able to stay in business that way. But that was really an example of employees coming together and thinking, you know, what do we need to do to stay in business? And this is something that we can try.
Thank you.
Yes, I'll go next. COVID has affected us in strange ways. You know, obviously we have our folks mostly working remotely. We still have a fulfillment need because we're e-commerce. So we have, you know, some people that have been there most of the time, but most of our people are working remotely. So that's different. And we've had to kind of develop that structure. And as it turns out, it's really working quite well. And we're actually on track to have our best fiscal year ever this year. You know, people are home looking for projects, and, you know, for people that like to work on their cars, are like, well, what am I going to do since I'm home and I have this extra discretionary income because I'm not going out and doing things? So let's do a car project. And so our biggest problem is just not being able to get enough inventory to sell to people throughout the course of this year. And I'm sure it's kind of a strange scenario, and it'll hopefully be a little more normal next year. However, it's the issues that we're having are not the traditional issues that many businesses are having throughout this process.
Thank you. Lakshmi?
Yeah, and you know, for us, we didn't actually have a physical space. We were operating a lot of our classes through partnerships with different organizations and different spaces. So, we had classes at Mental Health Center of Denver, Dahlia campus, and we had classes at a cafe in Denver called Gypsy House Cafe. We had classes at a spot called Heal Denver. So all of these spaces closed down, obviously, and we couldn't do in-person classes anymore. I shifted my teacher training online, and that actually worked out pretty seamlessly. Of course, there is a loss, of that personal contact, and I know for a lot of people, that's part of why they go to yoga classes and things like that, is for that community. But the teacher training we were able to shift online, and I think through this time, just because of all of the emotional and mental anxiety that people are feeling, people really still needed to connect in this way. So people felt really grateful to be able to have that space to connect with the yoga immersion program. And we did take a bit of a break, because we didn't know how long this was going to last. We were kind of sitting it out for a couple of months, continuing to have our co-op meetings and, talk about the future. And then when it, became apparent that we weren't going to be able to come back to having in-person classes, we started offering classes online. And that's been actually really successful. And again, I think it's just speaking to the fact that there is a lot of, need for yoga and for relaxation, for a way to relieve stress, in these times. So, we've been doing okay through COVID. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, I think this has been, in terms of collective power, getting everybody's minds to help troubleshoot and think through out of the box ideas, right? Because we're definitely in unprecedented times, and so we need unprecedented solutions for what we're dealing with. So I think employee ownership is a perfect example of this. Can we talk a little bit about the decision-making process? Now that you all are, or pretty soon to be, employee or member owners, what does the decision-making process look like for you all?
I can just speak to ours. We do consensus voting. So when we have decisions to be made, we usually do that at our co-op meetings, which we have. We started out having them twice a month, and now we've tapered that down to once a month, and we have leadership team meetings weekly. So some decisions are made by leadership team, and that's with the agreement of the rest of the members. But otherwise, we make our decisions by consensus, meaning that any member can block a decision if they want to discuss it more. So if by any chance a decision gets blocked, then we just continue to discuss until we can come to consensus.
Thank you. Jeremy?
Sure. Well, we're still kind of in the decision-making process about the decision-making. Historically, with owners, we had what we called a benevolent dictatorship. So, there was the owner, and then there was the senior people who we would all sit around a table and come to decisions, and the seniors would decide what we wanted to do, and the owner would give the thumbs up or the thumbs down. That's transitioned into, over the last couple of years, the owner basically has been stepping back, and we've been bringing a couple more people to the table, expanding our management to include some of the mid-level managers, where we can get around the table and kind of come to a consensus, as it were. In terms of the operation of the business, in terms of the big picture things, it would still be an owner level decision. Transitioning over into what we're working on our bylaws for the cooperative, we've decided to go with it for pretty much all board level decisions, which are, direction of the company level decisions, going with a, hold on a second. Sorry. My apologies.
No worries.
My cat came into the room and I was trying to grab her, but she left. So we're going to go to a 3/4 supermajority on basically all decisions. And the reason we're doing that as opposed to consensus is because, every once in a while we have a hot topic, and we just decided that we don't want to have stalemates on things. We want to be able to keep things moving. And so we don't want, one holdout to torpedo something that 8 other people think is a good idea. So.
Thank you. Diane?
So the way that our decision-making process works is we have monthly or twice monthly meetings. And since we have so many owners, Usually it's not everyone comes to every single meeting. Usually people make it to about one meeting a month. And in that beforehand, we make an agenda. Everyone puts their agenda items on we use Slack. And then, we discuss it point by point. And in terms of, sometimes there's things that we want to, get more information on or explore a little bit more, and then we'll assign those duties to a specific person who wants to take on that task. And then in the next meeting or the following one, if it takes a little bit longer, that person will, give all the information, and, we discuss it and decide what's best.
Yeah, as you all can see, the decision-making process, as Jeremy stated, it's a process in deciding how you all will make decisions. And so I think it's something that when cooperatives or employee-owned businesses are intentional about it, it can be whatever is decided is what is best for the business. And so there's no right or wrong answer in this one. I think it's just what makes sense for the businesses. And so I think that's also really important. I would say that as part of that process that Amy and Ashley talked about, it's so critical. You could get bylaws that are boilerplate and that you could just submit for the sake of the legal aspect, but it really is about the culture, right? It's about how much buy-in there is from employee owners. So that is definitely critical. There was a question about consensus. Somebody asked about any tips on consensus decision making. And so maybe Lakshmi, if you can talk a little bit about that, and then maybe we can ask Caroline Savory to unmute.
Yeah, so I was starting to kind of type in the chat, but it'll be easier to to speak on it. So for the most part, it goes pretty smoothly because we all want to move the business forward. But occasionally, like we have issues that come up where, it takes a really long time to like come to like talk it out, come to a decision. So one example of that is like bylaw changes, right? Like we had discussed making a change to the bylaws this year regarding in-person versus remote attendance at meetings. And of course, in COVID times, it's all remote attendance. But for some of our members really felt strongly that, the current circumstances aside, it's really important for us to be able to meet in person, since we're just meeting once a month, just to have that community connection with each other and to be able to discuss things in person. And then on the other hand, some of us felt that the accessibility, for some people, jobs or childcare was an issue and things like that. So this is an issue that we took almost a year to discuss and try to come to a decision around, and then, what we came up with after that is having two like tiers of membership, right? That there could be a tier of membership that wasn't an owner tier, a member owner tier, but that people could participate in the co-op, from our collective community, but they weren't required to attend meetings in that same way. Right, but that if you wanted to vote on decisions, you did have to attend meetings. So yeah, it can be frustrating at times, but I feel like when it's a really important decision like that if there is, anyone who feels strongly about it, like we really do need to talk about those things, with the community and kind of try to come up with a solution that works for everyone.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the honesty too. We want to make sure that that it is the right picture, right? Because we do know that employee ownership is not for everybody. And so the more real the picture that we paint, the better it will be.
Yeah.
Caroline, are there any other tips?
Hi. I'm in my kitchen cooking dinner, so you may hear sizzling in the background. So I just want to say too, I've really enjoyed this whole workshop so much, and thank you all for being here. I'm learning so much. Yeah, I teach workshops on consensus, and I recommend that organizations, cooperatives in particular, receive trainings on consensus decision making, because there is a body of best practices around that. And so the one tip that I can share tonight would be understanding that consensus does not mean unanimity, meaning everybody agrees. Consensus is a process to arrive at a reasonable answer that meets everybody's basic needs, and the culture of cooperation that Cyan talked about and others talked about is really crucial for consensus to work. So consensus exists when everybody in the group can say that they've had a chance to voice their ideas and concerns. They believe the group has heard them, and they can actively support the decision as the best possible at this time, even if it's not their first choice. So that's what I want to leave you with, is just knowing that consensus means those things and not just everybody agrees perfectly on the same issue.
Thank you. And thank you so much for that clarification, because yeah, I don't know, I've never been in a space where I can get everybody to agree on everything. So it would be nearly impossible in this space. So yeah.
Another tip I'd love to share before we move on.
Absolutely.
So before working with RMAOC, I was working with the Arizmendi Association of Cooperatives in the Bay Area, both as a worker owner of a bakery and then as part of a support team supporting 9 other co-ops. And we used a system that was called modified consensus. So it was actually kind of a hybrid of both. So that is also an option where we would start always with the goal of reaching consensus. But if at some point the facilitator or whoever was leading that meeting felt like we just needed to move on, kind of to Jeremy's point, if there's a certain issue, or Laxmi as well, just an issue that you're feeling stuck on, we could always convert to a majority vote. So there is a way to look at using both of those in one group.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. So yeah, and we touched a little bit on this. You all touched a little bit on this as we're making decisions. But how does the business continue to foster that sense of trust among employees or members? What does that look like, especially in the time of COVID? And anyone can start.
I think it's a lot about trusting that the people on the ground know what's best for the business. You know, the people that are there every day, that are, you know, dealing with, in our case, customers. And to that point, we've all of the owners that are not just the employees, but also the ones who own the other part of the business. They all have shifts. They all like work as part of the business. And I think that that's really crucial to having feet on the ground and knowing like what's important to us and our community.
Thank you.
I'll jump in. I think, you know, the facilitation of trust has a lot to do with having, you know, what your level of conversation is, you know, how open and honest and direct your conversation is. And that's something that can be challenging for anyone. There's actually a book I'm reading right now that I'll recommend that's helping me out a lot. And it's called Fierce Conversations. So that's, you know, something that I think is a good read for any business owner. I'm about halfway through it, and I'm reading it slow on purpose because it has a lot of really good things to say about, you know, how to have these conversations with people and have them effective. And you know, I won't get into it, but you know, go check it out.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I think, you know, for us, you know, our yoga practice is a big part of, you know, maintaining that sense of connection and trust between us. So we always, try to start with a little bit of practice and, and a check-in, just to really, feel that personal connection between all of our members.
Thank you. Now let's shift to some of the challenges. I want to paint the right picture. So what were some of the challenges that you all faced through the employee ownership conversion or the member ownership conversion?
I think that the decision-making process has been the hardest part. Running a business that it takes twists and turns every day. There's a lot of stuff to deal with. And that communication, you really have to make sure that it's there all the time or things can really break down quickly. An example of that was recently the city of Boulder instated a mandate that all college kids have to stay at home and they're not allowed anywhere. And we were like, it caught us really unaware. We didn't know, we had no warning from the city that this was happening. And we're a cafe, a lot of college kids come and do their homework. And it caught us so unaware. And then that decision-making process of between the owners of, well, what do we do? What are our next steps? Are we liable? Do we have to kick our customers out of our store, our community members out of our store? And it did cause a little bit of rift because it was so sudden and we had to take immediate action. But then the process of, really making sure that communication is there between everyone and everyone, kind of what Caroline said, that everyone is heard and respected, even if maybe the ending wasn't what everyone agreed upon. The process of making sure everyone was heard was really important for us. And I think that communication and conversation and keeping the line of communication open is really important, or you're going to run into some difficulties.
Yeah, thank you. So what did you all end up doing? I can't imagine that you would just kick people out, but
no.
do something.
Yeah, we ended up just making a bunch of signs and asking people to respect the city mandate. But we didn't ask anyone to leave.
Thank you.
As far as us with challenges, I feel like our whole process was really fairly forward pointing pretty much this whole time. We really haven't had any significant setbacks. Everyone was ready to do this. Everyone has been involved. So I'd say maybe, one of the challenges could be, internally, how do you motivate people who say they want to be involved in this, but they don't want to participate? So, because there are folks that say, hey, I want to be an owner and I want to do the things and have the benefits, but I don't actually, well, it's hard to say if they're just shy or if they just don't care, or that there's no participation from these individuals. And so, from a personal perspective, I kind of see that as a challenge because, personally, I want everyone who's at the table with me to want to be there and want to be involved and have a voice. And, I'm not thrilled about someone who's sitting at the table who is just, soaking up sunshine and not providing anything back. So I'd say that's a challenge on one level, but I don't know, perspective, I suppose.
Thank you. Yeah, I always say ownership is not for spectators. That's for sure.
Yeah, and that I think, is we've had sort of similar challenges in that way because I think it was new, this process is new for all of us. We definitely had folks who started out with us and then realized that, the amount of work that it takes and the amount of participation that it takes was like not what they were expecting, right? Or maybe it was more than what they had bargained for. So, we had some folks that decided not to continue, right? Because maybe it was it was too much. And then, you know, another one of our challenges is also just that, well, one of the challenges we've had is just finding a communication platform that works for everyone between meetings, you know, because we do have, you know, a couple of our member owners who didn't have cell phones, you know, or smartphones anyway, for example, or like, you know, just weren't that online, right? So, you know, just figuring out like a communication platform that worked for everybody is one of the challenges. Actually, we're still working on that, you know, and find like a good communication platform for making decisions between meetings.
Thank you. Cyan and Jeremy, do you all use a platform to make decisions?
Yeah, we use Slack, and it was really, we have quite a few members of our staff that don't have smartphones. And it was really hard to get them to make that transition, but they, you know, usually everyone has access to some type of screen, like whether it be an iPod or iPad or computer. And so maybe they don't check it as often, but then when they do, all the information is on there and they're looped into the decision-making process, even when you're not together.
Thank you.
Oh, well, really, we just have a weekly meeting where we discuss things. And honestly, we make a lot of decisions over email, which might not be the best way to do it, if that's just kind of how it's done. Is we're extremely busy. And one of the things about our company is we've always been much busier than the number of employees. And so our employees are always overloaded, and that's just part of the company culture. It's just how it always is. Also because we're seasonal. So, you know, you have to kind of mitigate your staff with the fact that it's, you know, you've got a seasonal ebb and flow. And so really, we've always just used emails, and we actually did use Slack for a while for internal communication, but, you know, that not using it at the moment. And then the weekly meetings. So it's nice to be able to kind of present ideas and present viewpoints over some emails. And then when we get together in the meeting and say, okay, everyone's had a chance to talk about this. It's any last thoughts, and then let's take a vote. And we take a vote, and then we move on to the next thing. And, you know, it works for us. You just have to figure out what works for you and your people, because it's going to be different for everybody.
Yeah, it can be the best platform, and if it doesn't work for the group, it doesn't matter, right? I do have one more question for the audience, and then we'll close because it's almost 7 o'clock. So recognizing that not everyone is an expert in every area of the business, how do you decide when outside help is needed to run the business? Have you all gotten to that point yet?
I can start. We actually have considered, and probably will on some level, have an additional board member who is an outside person, who is, you know, a business owner, business professional, someone who can bring in that level of acumen and that outside perspective that we don't necessarily have from, you know, our blinders are obviously pretty much all internal. And also, I'm not sure if this gets to the question, but recognizing the difference between what the responsibilities of the board are versus the responsibilities of the management. Because within the management, everyone does have a specialty. We have the person in charge of this department and the person in charge of that department, and they need to be the people who are in charge of that department. That's why they have that job. So in running those departments isn't the job of the board and the owners. The job of the board and the owners is to decide the direction of the business, not the operation. So, you know, kind of figuring out that stratification of responsibility, having an org chart, that kind of a thing. And then I think it's relatively well, I don't know. It may or may not be obvious when you need to bring outside help. I suppose if the decisions you're making are causing problems, maybe you need outside help.
And hopefully you can recognize it before they cause problems. But,
I think a time when you, or how you realize you need outside help is just noticing something that is becoming an issue, or maybe something that's not even becoming an issue yet, but has the potential to veer off track quickly. and then getting someone to come in and help you with that. For example, today, actually just today, we had someone who from our coffee roaster come in and train everyone who works as a barista on, you know, the right way to steam milk, polish espresso shot, and it can be something, you know, really simple or really like specialized, maybe that you need. I think the specialization is when you might need outside help. We've also talked about getting someone to do a de-escalation training for customers that, you know, you're having a problem with. The specialization or recognizing key areas that maybe keep coming up, and then getting someone from the outside to come in and give you a little bit of extra support.
Thank you.
Yeah, and you know, we similarly, you know, just hired a outside bookkeeper, right? Until then, we had our, you know, we were trying to do that internally and realized that we needed help, you know. So, so yeah, you know, and when we were only able to do that when we, you know, had enough, you know, income to be able to like spend on those kind of things. But initially we were just trying to do everything ourselves. But, you know, you realize as you go along where you need help, you know, as you try to do, you know, create the business.
Ah, thank you. So in the few minutes that we have left, I want to give you all an opportunity to give a plug on the business. Maybe about a minute and a half each on your business, and invite people to come visit you, because we are trying to grow the ecosystem. And so the more that we can ensure that your business is a success, we can ensure that others start to see employee ownership as a viable business model. So we'll start with Cyan, we'll go with Lakshmi, and we'll end with Jeremy.
Cool. I would love for all of you guys to come in and have a coffee or browse our store. We've been around since the 40s, or sorry, since the 80s, for 40 years. And people like Jack Kerouac and Waldman, all the beat poets and stuff used to come in and hang out. If you can't make it to Boulder, we also still have our mystery packs going. So if you go to tridentcafe.com, you can get a mystery pack, which is 5 books and a tea or coffee bag. Yeah, I really hope to see you all there.
Thank you.
Yeah, and we're available for all of your, you know, de-stressing needs. Yeah, and any kind of yoga needs that you have for your organizations. We also offer classes every day of the week. We have trauma sensitive yoga classes. We have yoga fundamentals classes series, you know, for folks who are new to yoga. We have prenatal yoga classes that we offer, chair yoga classes for elders. So we have a really broad variety of classes. We also have yoga for men, and yeah, just a really broad range of classes that we offer, because one of our principles is that we want to make yoga accessible for everyone. So you can find our schedule at www.satyayogacooperative.com.
Thank you.
Okay, well, if you know anyone who has high performance needs for their Mazda Miata, you can send them our way, which is probably not too many of you. And we're kind of hiding out on the western slope, and we don't really have visitors because we're e-commerce. So very happy to talk with you guys. If any of you guys have any questions for me, feel free to reach out through RMEOC. Be happy to chat with you. And maybe I'd be interested in hearing, there's a number of people here that have businesses that are looking to do this, if they have an opportunity to just give a 30-second plug for their business, because it might be more interesting than what I have to say.
Thank you, Jeremy. Is there anybody else who has a business that would like to unmute and just introduce the business? Okay, there's some shy business owners maybe. I thank you so much. Has been an honor to be here with you all and to be able to talk about employee ownership. I absolutely love employee ownership. I can talk about this all day. Thank you for sharing your experiences and for everything that that you all have done in paving the way. And so we appreciate it. We have contact information to share with you all. So if you want to take a screenshot of this, Center for Community Wealth Building will be doing a 30-day of abundance campaign. And so we would love to showcase any local businesses. And so we'll definitely showcase you all more than anything, because we want to make sure that everyone is aware of all the amazing things that are happening in Colorado. So, and on that note, thank you all so much for being here. And please be sure to take a picture of our email addresses and send us an email. If we can help with anything, let us know. Have a wonderful day, and we'll talk to you all later.
Awesome.